Joining Carl today is guest host and restaurant real estate expert Kyle Inserra. Together they explore the rise of kitchen automation as seen at the National Restaurant Show, the exciting potential of AutoLane's Curbside operating system, and why are men more likely to pretend delivered food was actually cooked by them. That's all ahead on this week's Digital Restaurant.
Happy Monday and welcome back to the Digital Restaurant. And today I have a brand new guest host. My good friend Kyle Inserra is with me. Kyle, I know you as the man when I think of real estate and restaurants. Your name always comes to the top of my mind. How you doing, my friend? How's your day going so far?
Pretty good, man. We survived the week, another week here. Busy work-wise, but busy personal life. I had my daughter graduate high school, so a little bit hectic this week. But thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, not at all. I really appreciate you being here. And as ever, there's always so much out there happening in our space. We had to spend a bit of time trying to curate the 5 articles we're going to talk about this week. I'm going to kick it over to you first because, of course, the biggest gathering of people in our industry happened just recently at the National Restaurant Show over in Chicago. My feet are still aching.
My feet are from last year. I didn't have a permanent injury.
There were a bunch of articles talking about some of the highlights from that particular show. What were the things that stood out for you?
I'll tell you, it was expected going in, the AI conversations. It was there last year, but that certainly to me seems like it was the number one topic at the show. And it actually seems like it's starting to be used more effectively in that restaurants are starting to understand how this can actually work. Whereas I feel like last year it was a little bit more like, oh, this is a cute little toy. This is the little fun robot. But now I think they're starting to see how it can really change their operations. So that for sure was one of the loudest topics. A lot of tech overall, and really about integrating these platforms. A little bit more of this consolidation and stuff, and the integration of who's going to integrate with what POS. This platform does, this one doesn't. How does it work with your business? So overall, I think the sentiment is tech, and now we're starting to realize ways that it actually works and how it's being implemented.
I agree. I pretty much went through every hall, walked up and down every aisle. And I have this strange habit of keeping track of how many packaging providers I see. I counted 145 different suppliers of bamboo plates and cups and things. And you think, and I always go to myself, how do these guys differentiate from each other? And I'm not sure I've got a convincing argument from any of them yet. But that was really interesting, like how many of those were there. There are two big themes that came to mind for me, mate, which was one, of course, the overhanging element of tariffs and the uncertainty and the inertia that's causing, not just for the tech players out there, but also for the kitchen equipment suppliers and decision inertia that's coming as a result of that. People aren't quite sure what's happening. Yeah. So is that going to hold back investment in the areas that are needed? But then conversely, I saw so much automation, robotics for the kitchen, inside the back of house. I've never seen as many providers, whether it be sous vide machines, whether it be automated arms for deep fryers. It seems like everyone was there this year. It's weird, right? When you see those two forces against each other.
It's weird. Yeah, for sure. Maybe that's one of the things these paper companies are doing, right? Like they're trying to get, what else can they do, to your point?
That's right. Yeah. I also recorded a podcast that will be coming out in a couple of weeks over at Point B's headquarters, where they've launched this tech center. But that was interesting, seeing this collation of different technology providers trying to overcome what you mentioned at the top around these integration challenges and being able to allow executives in the restaurant space to come in and play with the stuff alongside maybe alternative options that they're considering. So that I think was a really interesting theme, but it's a great show. It's just a big show, and boy, does it take a lot out of you.
You got to like break it up like you're going to Disney. One day you do Universal, one day you do this, one day it's hard. But about the tariff stuff, do you think that is how many people really have their head wrapped around it, generally speaking, right? Like the decision makers obviously are pretty tied in, they understand what's going on, but I just feel like people hear tariffs and it's like ingrained in us now that it's something that's negative going to hit our pockets.
Yeah, I think it's just the uncertainty more than anything, right? The fact that they might be there one moment and then not there the next. And especially when it comes to technology, there's a level of risk aversity, I think, attributed to it. So a lot of folks might be saying, should we go in now before potential this really expands out? Or should we just wait to see whether things are going to calm down?
Yeah.
One person said to me, it was actually a guy who's running a POS company. He said, Look, the problem is that now we're getting to situations where hardware is turning up at a port, and suddenly the tariff changes, and so therefore I've got to go back to my customers and say I need another 25 grand, and if I don't get that 25 grand within 30 days, it's not coming in. And so
Right.
there are these things that are going to potentially really unhinge a lot of companies. So hopefully we'll get better clarity over the months ahead. Certainly the 90 hiatus that is coming to its conclusion pretty soon. Hopefully we'll get some clarity at that point.
So AutoLane launches open curb and operating system. I tell you, this has become a hot topic. This is a great idea. I was love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it really is. I think first of all, folks that haven't heard of AutoLane, relatively new concept. They've launched this thing called Open Curb OS, which is described as a curb-wide operating system, and it's designed to manage autonomous vehicle arrivals. Yes, you heard me right, autonomous vehicle arrivals, particularly for QSRs. Think of it almost like a air traffic control for self-driving cars, picking up curbside orders. And the system handles everything from scheduling vehicle arrivals to authenticating license plates, managing parking zones, and even coordinating trunk openings when working with companies like Waymo. So your order handoff is smooth, fast, friction-free. And they're testing it in San Francisco, and they're also running a critical beta in Austin, Texas, where, of course, they're expecting Tesla to be launching its robo-taxis pretty soon. It's pretty crazy, right? You think about this, like the way it works is the QSR assigns several parking spots for these autonomous vehicle pickups. So parking spots, right? This isn't necessarily attributed to drive-through. So the AutoLane installs sensors and cameras to monitor those parking spot zones, and then they whitelist specific vehicle plates for authorized access into those areas. And then when the delivery platforms like DoorDash and Uber Eats request curb access, Open Curb is then assigning a parking spot. They share the GPS coordinates, and then it confirms the vehicle's arrival, which therefore allows the restaurant and the team member to come out, place the order in the vehicle's trunk, and then it heads off to the customer without needing any other staff involved in it. And so it's this choreography, I think, which I think is really quite interesting. We heard about the drive-through issue. Was it last year, the Waymo drive-through and the congestion at Chick-fil-A, right? That had the restaurant down for like 4 hours. This idea of curbside pickup and being able to have this air traffic control idea, I think it's really smart. What do you think? I'm sure you're speaking to folks about this type of thing.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody the other day about when it was just a standard when I was starting in the restaurant business that it was 28 to 30% profit margin. So now you're talking 10% at best. And if there are ways to get more deliveries with autonomous vehicles for less of a cost, I think you got to be open-minded to everything. I think that's the way we're headed. It's not going to go backwards.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing that's interesting for me is you know how everyone now describes drive-through performance based on the amount of minutes and seconds it takes for the average car to get through? I think it's going to get that direction pretty soon when it comes to pickup as well. And what they've seen in some of their testing is that they've dropped the time from 2 minutes to 1 minute.
It's wild.
And I can't remember the number off the top of my head right now, but I remember a big QSR chain once saying there's a significant value to every second that you save from a drive-through order.
Oh, the drive-through.
Therefore, 2 minutes to 1 minute on curbside pickup, and pickup in general, I think is absolutely massive, especially in a time when people are actually leaning more in towards pickup because of the savings that are involved in not having to pay the delivery aspect of it. And of course, with the automation angle from vehicles, that removes the human element, to your point, and therefore it's a far more efficient transaction, you got to hope, right?
It's still, I know people say this all the time, but it's the Amazon effect. We're used to paying a little bit more or just hitting buy now and getting it as quickly as possible, dropping it off at a locker, dropping it off while we're dropping off groceries. Any kind of friction between that experience and any other experience, including restaurants, is going to seem outdated, and you're going to lose customers. So yeah, I could see where they would say seconds count because it's already so competitive. If I'm going to go to Raising Cane's or Dave's Hot Chicken, or I don't want to wait 4 minutes over here, it's 1 minute over here. That's a differentiator. That's going to change the business.
Yeah, I don't know whether you've been in one of those Waymo vehicles yet. I was there last year, video out, and just when I went to the airport, and it made me think, wow, this could be such a fundamental shift in the whole delivery value equation. It's going to be fascinating. Their CEO suggests the widespread adoption of this could happen within 5 to 10 years. It sounds like you think it might happen even sooner, so we'll have to keep an eye out.
It certainly seems like it's happening real fast, all this stuff. So yeah, I love it.
All right. I've always put these guys in my top 7 of digitally mature restaurants. Wingstop in the news, largely around their smart kitchens. And I was only talking about that on the last episode around smart kitchens and the growth of those. What did you make out of what's happening over at Wingstop and how it's going to help them continue to push ahead?
Yeah, much like we were just talking about, the time aspect of it all. I think their ability to use AI, right? And really this forecast demand and cutting their production time in half, essentially, I think it was that, and the just the visibility on the app of what's happening with your order and when you can expect it. It's the same kind of theme, right? Applied to a different part of the business. What really stood out to me though was the adoption in a franchise model, right? Not easy. You hear that a lot from franchisors, like, I would love to implement something, but across all the franchise units, it's going to be difficult. So things get rolled out slowly. Franchisees adopting something like this, that's such a major disruptor in the industry and to their model, probably, like a lot of these guys, I think it shows a lot about what's going on in Wingstop's behind the closed doors up there. They're really thinking ahead.
Yeah. Again, it's all about being able to shift the timing of delivery, right? And this ability to be able to get more items through in a way, forecasting better, but then also produce faster. If you can deliver that convenience and then also add a level of efficiency to it as well, it's a win-win. And they have really got it down. That ability to speed things up faster, I think, is really encouraging. The interesting thing for me is that this is another company that is built internally, right? It's a proprietary tech stack. It's not a compilation of different parts that's helping them in that regard. So in that sense, it's enabling them to build across their workflows, specific for their business, specific to their type of cuisine.
Yeah.
And that's going to help when you're not having to like build around the technology. Let the technology build around you.
I think that's genius because it's also telling everybody that we're not focused on being better than you. We're focused on being better than us. We want to beat ourselves every day, and we don't care what's happening with other platforms and other concepts. We care about ours and how we can be more efficient. Pair this with the AutoLane feature. Are we talking about like 10-minute delivery times inside your 3-minute radius? That's wild. That is completely insane. So speed and efficiency, right? Less friction seems to be what all these guys are thinking about all the time. All right. So DoorDash came out with their trends report. Men trust the kitchen robots more than the ladies. Let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, it was a weird one. Let me just shrink you into the corner here and I'll talk them through. So first of all, they surveyed 1,500 of their customers. Of course, this report also takes into account a lot of anonymized data from the platform itself from DoorDash, but they're such a huge player now. It makes sense to take a little deep dive into what they were sharing. And the first one here is around the way in which AI continues to proliferate across everything in our industry. And slide 4 here was talking about the way in which recommendations are being seen to be something that many are actually quite comfortable with. Interestingly, the older the generation go, it becomes more around value as opposed to having AI recommend who they should be eating with, for example. But it seems to be that more and more people are seeing, look, like, yeah, if I get something recommended for me, that's actually good. That aids my experience. To your point a moment ago about just the way in which men are ready to let the robots cook their meals. Look at this. This is saying that they're twice as likely than women to trust AI tools in the kitchen. So back to what I was explaining about at the National Restaurant Show, where we saw a lot of those tools, it seems like there is a bit of a difference in opinion here. I don't know. It's an interesting one, right? How many times do we really think about how much automation is involved in the creation of our food? And ultimately, if we get a great burger, if we get a great spaghetti bolognese, whatever, do we care that a human's behind it? Or if it's being done correctly and consistently every time, is that more important? I'm sure there's lots of people listening that have a view on that. Let's keep going. This one I thought was really interesting. This was talking about the way in which social proof is helping different generations think about deciding whether to eat with a particular restaurant or not. And you'll see there on the left-hand side, the way in which food photos increasingly have a huge level of influence, and especially for the younger generation. So as I say to a lot of folks that are getting into this space, invest in the photography. It's so
Oh my God.
important that you don't scrimp on that particular one, because more people than ever, it seems, are eating with their eyes.
Oh.
There was a bit of sustainability stuff that was going on. Let me go to slide 9 here, where sustainability practices like locally sourced ingredients and food waste reduction are themes that, again, certainly the younger generations are more interested in. So thinking about how that forms a role within your marketing and value proposition. Slide 13. I can't go through everyone. This was fascinating. You remember in my first book, Kyle, we talked about the growth of different forms of culinary knowledge and the way in which people were becoming more curious and more inquisitive about trying different types of food. Look at the top 10 most ordered foods on DoorDash last year. And how many of those would you say fall part of the traditional American diet? When you see number 2 on the list, garlic naan, number 4 on the list, pad thai, number 5, miso soup. This shows that I think the country is becoming more intrigued by trying out far wider ranges of food than probably what they were doing 5 years ago, let alone 10. That one really stood out. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, obviously the fries were always a big thing when the food came out, so not a real surprise there. I think some of these foods, when you look at the garlic naan and you look at the pad thai and some of the other stuff there, it's just maybe it just travels better, right? Chicken tikka masala, I'm probably not going to know if somebody picked it up and put it in a bowl from the restaurant, if I was at the restaurant, or if I brought it home, right? It has that same kind of consistency. So it's foods that I think maybe there's a little bit of that. What can we make that can be delivered and still be good? I know that always goes into it, but I know fries were always a problem. But I think fries are one of those things, like, you want them when you want them. You don't care how you get them. Figure out the crispiness at home, I think. But I've still
yet to have good fries delivered. Have you ever had anyone deliver good fries to you?
No, I was just going to ask you, the packaging stuff we were talking about, there had to have been, were they still pushing, these make the crunchiest fries? To your point, I haven't seen it yet, so it must not be the case with those products.
Yeah, who knows? It's clearly a popular one, so they're going to keep on the menu for sure. So another question for you. 1 in 5 people pretend that their delivered food was made at home. So last dinner party, Carl, did you cheat? Did you basically order something in and say, yeah, I have made this? And it looks like us guys are more likely again than the ladies to do it, it says.
No, but I'm not opposed to it. But number 2, when we first opened our first restaurant, the first catering order we ever had, the woman dropped off like 20 of her own ceramic trays. And she said, just put the food in here. I'm going to pass it. She just was honest about it. I'm going to pass it off as my own.
I love it. That's great.
That's about my yeah.
Oh my goodness. Another theme that I saw again, especially at the show last week, was just the way in which more and more folks are holding the alcohol. So what we saw between 24 and 23 was an 82% increase in orders with non-alcoholic beer involved, and also an increase in the hemp and THC delivery of orders as well. So that is a theme that continues to proliferate. We're seeing more and more of the younger generation saying, you know what, actually, I just want the food and maybe just a refreshing drink as opposed to anything with alcohol in. And then this was another one. We talked about timing earlier. How quickly does someone decide a restaurant on DoorDash? 49% of people take 5 to 10 minutes to decide where they're going to order from. 16% less than 5 minutes. That's still quite a decent period of time, I think. But it points, I think, back towards this idea of you go onto a marketplace to see what's out there, to be able to browse and to be able to see what's available. But if you aren't at the top of those listings, if you're not on those carousels, you're probably not going to be part of the consideration.
Super. It's that digital real estate. It's becoming more. And when I say digital real estate, not that metaverse stuff that everybody was talking about, but your presence online, it's becoming almost equally as valuable as your brick and mortar.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing I'll share before we get on to the next one. Clearly, DoorDash is no longer just a restaurant company. Look at this now. Birthday gifts. 43% of folks have said that they use them for gifts for birthday, 25% on Valentine's Day. Thank you gifts. Really good way of thinking about using another occasion as something for perhaps those people that don't plan in advance for the gifts that they're trying to give to people. So that one really stood out. It was a really good report, though, right? I think
great report.
When you think about these things, it's just there's so much happening in this space. These data points, I think, are really important for folks thinking about how they're shaping their business and their menus for the year ahead.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, your point about when people see something online that they're more apt to get the virality of that stuff and investing in the photos. I've lived it with a teenager in my house these last 8 years or so. And undoubtedly, I'm going to say 75% of the time, because that's about the amount of time she gets to pick where we eat, we're going because something was on TikTok or Instagram. Wow. Even when we were on vacation, where are we going for lunch? I don't know, Juju found something over here in the shopping center on TikTok. We're going to go see it. We all look at it. We say, yeah, all right, let's go. Right?
Amazing.
There's like a validation that's like, oh, it's on TikTok. Must be good.
I love that.
It's crazy.
It just goes to show, right? You mentioned the real estate thing again. It's back in the day, it would have been the smell from the restaurant, right? As you're walking past, oh, what's that? Now it's the video image on TikTok.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it was. I'll never forget it. I wish I knew the name of the place. I'd shout him out. But it was like a chopped chicken Caesar wrap. Nothing crazy, but we had to get there before it got packed. And she was right. Line out the door. So
amazing. All right, my friend. Look, let's round it out today with another DoorDash article, actually, and a couple of things. First of all, someone's stopping voice AI. So DoorDash are stopping their investment into the voice AI stuff, but also they came out with this list on preferred tech partners. Tell us about that.
I think the stopping of digital AI, they're concerned about the interactions, right? That seems to be the case, right? They're not. It's not fine-tuned enough. I think it's a smart move. Ultimately, I think they're gonna eventually get it right. I don't think that it's the end of it all, but certainly I think that making sure you do it correctly, it seems like that's the number one concern there. Is it's not robotic. It has to be seamless like us, and that makes a lot of sense to me that they're going to focus on doing that.
Yeah, I think it's also this piece around where do they want to play and excel in. So ultimately, as I've said many times, that most generative AI, of which voice AI plays a role in, projects end up failing. They never actually make it to full on scale. And part of that is about making sure appropriate testing is put in place to ensure it works. And so maybe it's just pause, maybe it's bring it back in and take another look at it. Maybe we'll see it come out again in future once they have been able to solve some of those gremlins.
Aren't they just doing what a company that is so forward thinking should be doing? Like they're moving fast. If it works, it doesn't work. We're going to figure it out. But this seems like what's happening now. I think at the end of the day, that's love it or hate it, but that's just kind of the way that it is. But
Chipotle were doing that recently, right? With their Autocado machine. They took it back into head office to test it again before bringing it out and piloting it out in store. So you're right. It's about good testing methodology.
Yeah. And like, there's no way to do it without testing on the public, right? You could do it behind closed doors all you want, but at the end of the day, you need somebody who's going to be able to say, this is the volume we do. And if it doesn't work for this level of volume, we're not interested. So you got to test it in public. And that's the scary part of being that type of brand. But ultimately, I think they're going to be the ones that are going to be leading this type of space. But you had mentioned about the integrations, so important. The preferred integration stuff, I think, what are they looking for? Error rates below a certain percentage. They're involved with some of these the tech companies that we all know, Toast, Square, Otter, Checkmate. But I think it makes sense, right? They don't want to slow down. They're going to have a certain level of expectations from their partners.
Yeah. This wasn't a huge surprise to me. Obviously, back in the day, we would have had integration partners like, remember Ordermark, when they would take in all the different orders from the different aggregators and then send them through to the POS. Of course, now DoorDash have got that whole interface themselves with companies like Toast. And so in that sense, I think those tech partners that have worked with the marketplaces and are seen to be friendly to support marketplaces are probably going to land themselves on that list. But I wonder how many other tech vendors are trying to get part of that list. Is that some form of verification that's going to give some confidence to restaurateurs out there?
That's what I was just going to ask you. I said, I bet if you go back in all the podcasts that you've done and conversations you've had and things you've written, you probably predicted this on some level, right? That this was going to happen, the kind of cream rises to the top, and eventually we're going to see this consolidation. But I don't know what that process looks like. It's actually a very interesting question. How do you start to choose new partners to integrate with? What are the exact guidelines?
Exactly. And how far will it go? How far will it go beyond just the ordering interface? Are we going to see recommended partners in completely different areas in future? Yeah. We'll keep an eye on it. But listen, before we finish, Carl, I'd love for you to tell the audience a little bit about 10Wrap. We've mentioned AI a few times today, and it's certainly an area which you're involved in. But as I mentioned at the top, you're a guy who's been in restaurant operations, helping brands scale from very small operations to much larger operations. And now you're doing something with 10Wrap. What's that about?
Yeah, so I was in the restaurant business. I worked as a broker for a while, and it's a completely downshift in terms of speed and process, right? Restaurants have a certain rigidity and SOPs to follow, and technology's implemented, and we're trying to get better every day. And it's a completely different space than real estate. But long story short, I wound up doing a lot of work with franchise concepts on the restaurant side. And I was amazed at the inefficiencies in the process. And I think if anybody could take a peek behind the door of some of these brands, you'd be like, holy, how do they have the number of units that they have? But what's happening now is vacancy rates are historically low. And these deals are just not getting done for some of these smaller emerging brands. It's tough to compete with the Raising Cane's and the Chick-fil-A's and the Starbucks and Dutch Bros. And landlords are investing or investigating rather based on your credit, really. Brand's cool, sexy, great followers, but do you have the money and accessibility to investors that would make this a real growth project where they could feel comfortable? But thanks to AI, we've realized that there are some redundant processes on the brokerage side and the real estate site selection side that can make life a lot easier. So our whole goal is to build the machine behind the brand. A lot of restaurants can't afford, the emerging restaurants can't afford a full-time director of real estate. So you have the franchise sales team selling units all over the country, different brokers on every side. It just becomes a real mess, and you lose units. And I read an IFA article that said that franchisors lose $48,000 a month per unit, per store, per month they're delayed.
Wow.
It's a lot of money. So we've implemented some AI technology to handle the reach out and the site scoring. So we are now presenting new franchisees with a completely vetted list of what's available, what's coming available, what opportunities will be this year, what will be next year, what will be 5 years from now, potentially, in a fraction of the time.
Great example of how these new capabilities are starting to come to the fore. And paired with your experience, Kyle, I'm sure you're helping a lot of folks out to make the right decision, because we know if they get that decision wrong, doesn't matter how good the food is or anything else, that's a real problem for many out there. And it's probably a big reason why so many restaurants fail. So if people want to find out more, reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do it?
LinkedIn's great, or Kyle at 10rep.co, or at Kyle Inserra on really any platform. Thank you for allowing me to talk about that. It's part of the reason why I'm a little bit scattered today. I've been running around trying to keep up with these AI agents, but they're already taking over my business. So yeah, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to let you get back to chasing those agents and bots around. Always appreciate you joining me on the show, my friend, and congrats on all your success. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, listen, if you'd like to reach out to Kyle, you know where to reach him. Please leave your comments below. Any questions that you got for anything that we've covered today? What do you think? Are you going to be trusting of those robots in the kitchen? And will we see you in Chicago next year, looking to see what impact maybe those tariffs have had on the industry? But until next time, thanks for listening. The Digital Restaurant Podcast is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Watch us, rate us, and subscribe to The Digital Restaurant on YouTube, and follow along on all our social media digital restaurant channels. Thanks for listening.